Okay, so I just came home from my day-to-day, and this interesting video on my recommendeds showed up called 4 Reasons Why Dinosaurs Are Not 65 Million Years Old. Oh boy. So I'm going to watch it and react to it. I'm still working on elucidating the Shroud of Turin Part 2. Principal filming for that should be next week, give or take. And, until then, now that the school year is over and I have a lot more free time, I'm thinking I'm going to be uploading a lot more videos. So, before I get right into it, I think it's high time I talked about why addressing this is important to me. Because, I can imagine a lot of detractors saying, well, Josh, why don't you focus on big issues like, say, atheism or Islam, which are videos I do have ideas for, but why do you focus on young earth creationism? What's the harm? Or at least that's what some people who know me personally might ask. And the answer is simple. If we have to lie for our beliefs, then our beliefs have the same value as a lie. I can't fight secularism and atheism while people on my supposed team, even though I would argue that young earth creationists are not on my team, are essentially demonstrating that belief in God leads to a denial of reality. That's pretty much it. And, you want to believe that the earth is young? Then just be intellectually honest and claim that you can't prove it. But there's, having a degree in this subject, there is just mountains and mountains and mountains of hard, testable proof that the earth is not young. Especially when you account for certain realities, like, for instance, a lot of the older geologists, a lot of the first geologists throughout history, a lot of them believed in a literal Bible. A lot of them believed in a literal flood. A lot of them thought that the earth was significantly younger. They discovered it wasn't, and they reported that it wasn't. Okay? It's not impossible to be intellectually honest about this. Geology, as a field, crawled out of it with ease. Anyway, let's get into this. I have not watched this video preemptively. I'm going into this totally blind. I have no idea what this guy is going to say. I might pause the video to grab a paper based off what he says. So, let's have a look.
I'm going to give you 4 quick scientific reasons why there's no possible way those bones are millions of years old. This is science now. I'm not quoting the scripture anymore. We're looking at science.
All right, so he says that we're going to be using exclusively science. Cool. Science is about what's testable and repeatable. And it is the pursuit of facts, not truth. Okay? As the famous saying goes, if you want truth, philosophy class is down the hall. We look for facts in science. So, I'll be holding this guy to it. You can believe that.
4 reasons, scientifically, those bones can't possibly be millions of years old. First of all, most dinosaur bones we find are still fresh. They haven't fossilized. The original material.
Oh my god, there's no way he just said that. I can't breathe. Oh my god. Oh my god. Ugh. Whew. Most dinosaur bones are fresh. Wow. That is a doozy. Oh, okay, hold up, wait. I have to stop myself here. He hasn't given an explanation. So, I wanna reply to this, but let's wait for his science. Let's wait for his evidence for this.
Material is still there. Wait a minute, if they're 65 million years old, they should have fossilized a long time ago. They're still fresh. Secondly,
so remember, he said at the beginning of this video, we're gonna talk about the science. He demonstrates 0 for this talking point. 0. Now, the first thing that I'm noting here is a complete and total ignorance of the word fossil. Fossil does not mean fossilized. Fossil is anything organic that's dead, that's 10,000 years old. Mammoth bones are fossils. They're actually fresh. They're older than 10,000 years old, so they're a fossil. Fresh does not mean not fossil. Fresh also doesn't mean, or fossil also doesn't mean that it's hard fossilized. That's not true. On top of that, he's just lying. Evidenced by the fact that he provides no evidence of most dinosaur bones being fresh, because they're not fresh. I can understand why a layman not familiar with geology would think they're fresh. After all, dinosaur bones tend to be made up of a conglomerate of lithic material and calcium, and calcium is probably from the original bone, but that doesn't mean that it's fresh. This is just a lie. And remember what I said, if we have to lie for our faith, what does that say about our faith? Yikes. If this is... I can only imagine... I didn't think I was going to get slapped with that. I can only imagine what the other 3 are. We're not even a minute into this video. Oh my god.
carbon-14 in dinosaur bones. I won't go into a carbon-14 dating lecture. Carbon-14 decays away. It gets into all living things, and it decays away at a certain rate that if 80 or 90,000 years were to go by, all the carbon-14 would be gone. It has a half-life of 5,730 years. So it decays away and then it's gone. If a dinosaur bone is 65 million years old, there wouldn't be any carbon-14 left because it would be gone after a few tens of thousands of years. It's still in the dinosaur bones, and it's not contamination. It's still in there, indicating thousands of years. The Bible says a worldwide flood, roughly 4,500 years ago. If the dinosaurs got buried in those sediments at that point, there would still be carbon-14 in their bones. Thirdly,
okay, so someone doesn't know how carbon-14 works. He tries to poison the well by saying that it's not like something inserted later, but it is something inserted later. Carbon-14 is extremely ubiquitous here on planet Earth. As soon as you uncover something like a dinosaur bone, it's gonna have carbon-14, which is why we don't carbon-14 date fossils. On top of that, he claims that carbon has a half-life of 5,730 years. It's actually not true. It has a half-life of 5,700 years plus or minus 30 years. And you might say, well, Josh, that's a weird thing to quibble with. But it's not a weird thing to quibble with, because he said that we were going to talk about the science. So let's talk about fluid dynamics for a bit. He said that we weren't going to talk about faith, but here we are talking about a global flood, so that's lie number 2. If a global flood buried these dinosaurs, why don't they appear throughout the entirety of the geologic column? Why don't they appear at the bottom of the geological column? Fluid dynamics tells us that the heaviest stuff ends up on the bottom, the lightest stuff ends up on the top. So dinosaurs would be at the bottom of the geological column, and they're not. That's basic physics. That's high school level physics. You don't need to be a geologist like myself to know that one. You don't even need to be a physicist to know that one. You don't even need to be a scientist to know that one. Your average high schooler in 7th grade learns this. Why do we find consistent fossils occurring on consistent layers throughout the entirety of the geological column? Because it's not just dinosaurs, okay? There are specific organisms that only occur in their region of time. If a global flood buried all of them, we would not be observing that.
Soft tissue and red blood cells in dinosaur bones. I don't have time to pull up the video. I have a short video showing you dinosaur soft tissue in the laboratory being stretched and snapping right back. And then you have to ask yourself when you're looking at that, is that 65 million years old? Impossible. Now you're tired about hearing dinosaur soft tissue, right? No? Oh, we just discovered this 2 days ago and it hasn't hit the news cycle yet, right? Well, try 1995. We've known about this in fact, even prior to that, we've known about this for a long, long time. Why aren't you hearing about it? They don't have an answer. How those materials could last. Biological materials cannot possibly last that long. If you do a Google search, find an article, look for the word iron, and there it is. Oh, iron can preserve things longer. Yep, a little bit, not millions of years. You get too much iron and it destroys it. They don't have an answer yet. And we're never.
So I'm going to interrupt at this point because that's well poisoning, which makes that big lie number 3. Iron can sustain something like that for millions of years. Who said anything about too much iron? Just the right amount of iron and it will preserve it. Why does it have to be too much iron? Oh, because you think that it's a giant clump of iron? No, that's not how it works. Iron is fairly ubiquitous on the Earth's surface, not as much as something like, say, oxygen or silicon, but is a heavily occurrent element, and it has a funny little property that it can be carried by water. So if there's a proper amount of iron above where the tyrannosaur bone is, it's a tyrannosaur, by the way, that they found this soft tissue. If there's a water source that is pushing some of the iron down, it can slowly feed it. Who said anything about this tyrannosaur fossil being just next to a giant clump of iron? See, and it's stuff like this that really gets me hyper antagonistic. You know, it's one thing for you to say something ridiculous, like dinosaur remains are still fresh, right? That's just absurd. It's another thing for you to just attempt to poison the well by telling the people you are talking to, don't Google this, don't Google this. If you do, just look up the word iron and you'll see that that's the only explanation they have. Oh, and by the way, I will provide no citations for anything I'm saying. Just believe me. Hashtag believe. Also, we're going to go over just the science, by the way. Just the science, but hashtag believe. Just science, hashtag believe. Pick a lane. Pick a lane. It's either about belief or it's about science. If it's about belief, keep your beliefs out of the science. If it's about the science, don't touch it with your beliefs. Provide evidence.
They were looking for it before. They found it by accident. And the woman who did the initial test, Dr. Mary Schweitzer, did her test, like, well, this can't be soft tissue because we know the bones are 65 million years old. So she did a test a second time. Looked like soft tissue. Did her test third time, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, 17 times. That's a scientist saying, I don't like these results. I'm going to keep doing it until I get one that fits, and then I'll use that one. I'll ignore all the other ones. She finally had to admit, this is dinosaur soft tissue. And now they all know, yeah, it's soft tissue, red blood cells, osteocytes, and all that. And now they're finding it all over the place. Bones that they say are 225 million years old, 400 million years old. And creationists, we're finding our own because they don't share their data so much. So I was out at an excavation, dinosaur excavation, a couple.
You mean you're presenting a lot of hoaxes and lying about Weiss's work? We did not find a complete system. A lot of the tissue that she recovered is extremely damaged. This is major lie number 4. Now, I decided to go grab the paper because, you can't really rely on young Earth creationists to really tell you what's in the paper. Hey, editing, Josh here. Small misspeak on my part. The paper on screen is not Schweitzer's paper. I just simply meant to put into the video 2 papers showing that we are going back and forth talking about this discovery and that we're not hiding from it. Schweitzer's original paper will be down below with the other 2 that I demonstrated, so just bear with me. Just a small misspeak, my bad. One thing to note right off the bat, you'll notice that Tyrannosaurus rex now has confirmed genetic-like commonness with modern birds. So good luck debunking evolution now if you really want this one. That's just something that I want everyone to understand exactly what we're going with here. You'll notice that in the conclusion of this particular paper, which I'll provide in the description, it says, our results suggest that cross-contamination should not be readily dismissed. They are likely the source of collagen masked with earlier studies, thereby yielding false positive results for supposed dinosaur derivation collagen. The most recent 2017 study does not find their unique dinosaur peptides and entirely matches alligators, yet in both studies the levels of deamidation, I can't pronounce that word, my bad, were suspiciously low, which can be used to detect recent contamination. Hence, we urge the appropriate measures to test the endogeneity should remain an important part of the scientific process. This guy's pretending like we're finding this stuff all around. And really, MOR 1125 is kind of the only well-known one. The thing is that, and this is a common phenomena, whenever a discovery like this happens, creationists love to pretend that it supports their hypothesis. I will also leave in the comments not just that paper, but another paper that gives chemical plausibility to this occurring. Because again, he is essentially lying here and saying that, oh, well, we don't know. No, we have ideas. It doesn't break reality. It doesn't suggest anything young. Do we know 100% what's going on with those? No. Did Switzer report anything that subsequently suggested that we can't know what's going on? No. Science is about what's testable and demonstratable. It's funny that he accuses the mainstream scientific community of not sharing data, because the reality of it is that the young Earth community doesn't actually share their data. You cannot post a paper on the Answers in Genesis. They have their own paper. You cannot post a paper on that paper unless you sign a statement that says that you believe in a young Earth. No such statement exists on a normal paper. And that's because young Earth creationists are about ideology, not about reality. And so, when in doubt, just project it out. Just project that that's what the mainstream's doing, even though it's really what you're doing.
Summers ago, and sent the bones over to the University of Liverpool to be tested and find soft tissues in them. So, evidence, and then last, final scientific evidence, DNA in dinosaur bones. DNA is more fragile than red blood cells in soft tissue. And there's fragments of DNA in dinosaur bones, which cannot be there if they're 65 million years old. If they were buried in the flood 4,500 years ago, it could still be there. So that's just a start. That was even longer than I wanted to do, but watch the video series, Dinosaurs in the Bible, and you'll take that and it'll just keep going and going and going. And when you're done, you're like, I didn't know half of that. That's really interesting. But then it's going to be awkward, because you will maybe have a new view on dinosaurs.
Watch that video series, you say? Don't mind if I do. If I find time, I think you and me are gonna get really acquainted. I would really like to see that data. I would really like to see that paper. And something tells me there isn't going to be any of it, now is there? It's going to be 2 hours of you asserting things with a picture, maybe another hoax, you know, like all the little footprints that we find in Kentucky that aren't dinosaur footprints, that they're clearly cartoonish and not real. Stuff like that, maybe? I don't know. That might be a little mean of me to assert, but young Earth creationists have a very long history of just producing hoaxes. But I'll definitely look for that video series. That sounds like a fun project to do on my break.
Will be shy to share it with anyone else because they're going to think you're crazy.
Rightfully so, because anybody who thinks that dinosaurs were buried in a global flood doesn't know basic physics. They don't know basic geology. They really don't know anything science-related. Now, I have met young Earthers that do actually do good science. And maybe it's just my personal bias. Maybe I personally don't think that they're particularly good scientists. But I do have a lot of respect for those guys, because at the very least they'll just say, well, I think the Earth is young, but I know for a fact I can't prove it. As for the people who have the audacity to stand on a stage and say this unironically, all I'll simply say is this. That holy book beside your hand says that teachers will be held accountable for what they teach. What will your excuse be when God asks why you lied? Just some food for thought.
I expect people to think I'm crazy when I have those biblically based beliefs.
No, I think you're crazy because at the beginning of this video, you said that 99% of all dinosaur remains are fresh when they're not. I still can't believe that was said. I believe in the Bible. Well, I believe in the Bible insofar as to what I can prove, because that's what an intellectually honest scientist would do. I don't believe in a literal Genesis 1 to 11. I should probably do a video series on that one day, but until then, you know, believing in the Bible doesn't make anyone crazy, and no one really thinks this. This is nothing more than an attempt to create an us versus them narrative. This is what cults do. This is what cults need to do in order to hold on to people. Ostracize, make the people in the room feel important, and then demonize the outside world by lying. Is young Earth creationism a cult? Well, it doesn't really surround a singular person, which is one of the big stuff, but I'd argue it meets a lot of the bite my model.
But if I have time to explain it to them, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. It doesn't sound so crazy anymore. But it's just awkward because now you have to disagree with the majority of the secular scientists, which...
It would still be crazy. If you were going to assert to me that that bone structure is buried 4,000 years ago, and you don't have any proof, and the best proof you've got is carbon dating, which we don't use for geological structures, yeah, I'm gonna call you crazy. If you demonstrate a stark lack of understanding of 7th grade physics, then I'm gonna call you crazy. And if you're going to assert that fossils have to be fossilized in order to be a fossil, then I'm gonna call you crazy, because that means you don't even know what a fossil is. I don't think you're crazy because you believe in the Bible. I think you're crazy because you've lied several times, and the things that I think you're genuine on, you've demonstrated you're actually clueless on.
Most of the scientists don't know anything about that. They're not even studying it. They've just been told it's truth, and all that's their belief by faith.
I just recorded a whole little section there only to realize that I was muted. Yeehaw. Basically, at the end here, he just demonizes secular science, and all I really said is that if that's the angle we're going to go for, then I think secular scientists are well within their right to just dismiss people like this as crazy. Because really, at the end of the day, that's kind of what these people are, if that's going to be where that conversation ends. They're just crazy. You know, I have no sympathy for the young earther that is uneducated, who doesn't know anything about what scientists do and don't study, because, you know, geologists are not the only people who study the age of the earth and fossilization. Paleontologists, biologists, chemists, even astronomy to some extent, all of these sciences confirm an old earth. You know, and together they form an entire continent of data. You think that that's going to get overturned from one little discovery? No, that's not how that works. So, as a religious scientist, I think that secular scientists are well within their right to call you crazy if that's really how you're going to try and get around that fact. And really, just as a question for anyone who thinks this guy is salient, does it not bother you that 99.99% of all people who have adequately studied this, who have the degree, who have done research, does it not bother you that 99.99% do not agree with you? You know, at what point do we call it hubris when you refuse to do the research and then you call all the experts delusional and secular in order to try and wipe it away, creating an us versus them nonsensical mentality that, hearkening back to the beginning of this video, does not exist in the conversation of science? I don't know. And I don't know how to end this video. Shalom Aleichem.